Concentration camp guard Irma Grese was the youngest war criminal sentenced to death by hanging in the Bergen-Belsen Trial in 1945. She attracted worldwide attention because the crimes she was accused of, her brutality and cruelty, and her sadism toward the prisoners, were in stark contrast to her appearance. She had many names: Hyena of Auschwitz, Angel of Hell, or Queen of Belsen. Her prosecutor said of her at trial, "And there isn't a single cruelty that took place in that camp for which she wasn't known to be responsible." She regularly participated in the gas chamber selection, punished arbitrarily, and when she came to Belsen, she continued exactly the same way. The trial against the defendants ran from September 17, 1945, to November 17 of that year. The municipal gymnasium was specially converted to provide sufficient space. In addition to numerous prison sentences, 11 death sentences were handed down. Irma Grese was one of these 11. Immediately after the verdict was announced, Grese defense attorney, Major Cranfield, attempted to present mitigating circumstances in court, but these reasons did not persuade the court to revise its verdict. The only remaining chance to escape the hanging was to write a petition for clemency addressed to Field Marshal Montgomery. After the verdicts were announced, a list was passed from one death row inmate to the next in prison. Anyone could sign up if they wanted to write a petition for clemency. Former concentration camp commandant Joseph Kramer signed up as early as November 18. That day, a reporter reported, Irma Grese was still sobbing in her cell, unable to believe she had been sentenced to death. One day later, she too added her name to the list. Only the two convicted guards, Johanna Bormann and Elizabeth Volkenrath, declined to submit a petition for clemency. Within a tight time limit of 48 hours, the convicted persons could then write the petition themselves or commission their lawyer to do so. Camp Commandant Joseph Kramer wrote his own. For a long time, it was thought to be lost in the archives until our author located it in London. If you're interested, we've already published a documentation about it. You can find this documentation in our video list. Apparently, nothing concrete was known about Irma Grese's plea for clemency until now. In the documentation Nazi war criminals sentenced to death and their pleas for clemency in full text, this topic was already addressed, and the search for clues began. All that was known was that there was a plea for clemency from warden Irma Grese. Media reports also indicate that she may have initially written the petition herself after consulting with her lawyer, Major Cranfield. Her plea for clemency has now surfaced, quite by chance, in London's National Archives. However, it was not written by her herself. Instead, it was written by her lawyer, Major Cranfield, on behalf of his client, Irma Grese, and is 2 typed pages long. It is unclear, however, whether another missing handwritten petition for clemency from her actually exists. It is also conceivable that her lawyer advised her against submitting the self-written petition because its content might have done more harm than good, and Major Cranfield then drafted one on her behalf. However, this point has not yet been conclusively clarified and is being discussed. It remains to be seen whether further archival discoveries will emerge. But now let us finally look at Irma Grese's plea for clemency in full.
In the matter of Belsen war crimes trial, and in the matter of the accused Irma Grese. Whereas on the 17th day of November 1945, the military court trying the case of the above-mentioned accused pursuant to the royal warrant for the trial of war criminals, dated the 14th of June, 1945, as subsequently amended, found the said Irma Grese guilty on both counts in the indictment against her, and thereon sentenced her to death by hanging. Now therefore I, Lionel Sidney William Cranfield, a temporary major in His Majesty's Army, appointed as defending officer to the said accused, hereby present this petition against finding and sentence on behalf and on the instructions of the said Irma Grese pursuant to Regulation 10 attached to the said royal warrant. My petition is that the finding and sentence above mentioned annulled for the following reasons. 1. That the finding was bad in law in that the offenses alleged against the accused in the charge sheet and the evidence do not amount to a war crime as charged of which she was found guilty. In support of this contention, I adopt the argument presented to the court by Colonel H.A. Smith, which will be found in Volume 45 of the transcript of the official shorthand notes of the proceedings, pages 26 to 29. And B. Since the accused must be accepted as a civilian and not a member of the armed forces, there being no evidence before the court to the contrary, and the only evidence pertinent to this matter, I refer to the evidence of Joseph Kramer in Volume 20 of the transcript of the official shorthand notes of the proceedings at page 12, supporting this proposition. And there is no evidence or allegation against her of illegitimate hostilities, espionage, war treason, marauding, or other war crimes, which can be committed by a civilian. Therefore, she, as a civilian, not engage in hostile action or warfare against the armed forces of the Allies, is incapable of committing a war crime of the nature charged that is a violation of the rules of warfare. In support of this intention, I refer to the argument of Colonel H.A. Smith at page 29, volume 45 of the transcript of the official shorthand notes of the proceedings. 2. That the court was unable to give proper consideration to the defense of the accused because the court was misdirected in law by the deputy judge in that. A. He directed the court that a statement of the law relevant to the case was to be found in Volume 2 of Oppenheim's International Law. Although this book was published in 1944, after a number of the alleged offenses had taken place, he omitted to instruct the court as to the relevant international law from which the material law should be derived. B. He omitted to give the court adequate direction as to whether the alleged acts were legal under the accursed domestic law. If so, what was the effect of any conflict between that domestic law and international law on the proof to be required of mens rea in the accused? C. He omitted to direct the court as to the position of the accused in regard to committing a war crime if the court had not to be a member of the armed forces. D. He failed to direct the court as to the proof of combination or concerted action necessary in law to find the accused guilty of a joint offense. E. He failed to direct the court as to the circumstances in which they could receive as evidence against the accused evidence given against the other accused. F. He omitted to direct the court as to what it meant by an unchallenged rule of warfare, so that in particular the court would be in a position to consider the argument addressed to them by Captain J. R. Phillips M.C. Awe, Volume 48, page 28 at Sec transcript of the official shorthand notes of the proceedings. 3. That the sentence was excessive in that A. The accused at that time the more serious alleged offenses were committed was under 21 years of age, and the alleged offenses were as to some in obedience to superior orders, received in a quasi-military capacity as to the remainder in obedience to the influence of the general practice and environment surrounding her, and as to them all in obedience to and consistent with the propaganda instructions and directions of the leaders of her country, since she was of an age to consider such matters. And B. The court have ignored the fact that both the prose-cutting officer in his closing address and the Deputy Judge Advocate General in his summing up accepted the accused as an honest witness who had admitted the minor offenses of ill treatment and denied the major offense of killing by shooting in the gas chamber. Signed this 22th day of November 1945. Cranfield, Major.
Field Marshal Montgomery rejected all submitted requests for clemency on December 7, and it's likely that the convicts learned of this just one day later. This would also explain why Grese wrote a farewell letter on the 8th. On December 11th, the convicts were transferred from Lüneburg to Hameln Penitentiary, where they were to be executed. These photographs were taken around noon. The execution took place on December 13th. The executioner assigned to the task described the procedure in detail. Elisabeth Volkenrath was the first to be hanged, and her death was dated 9/34. Then Grese was forced out of her small cell. Her hands were tied in the hallway. At approximately 9:43 a.m., she entered the execution chamber. To minimize the psychological strain, her executioner wrote, "Everything happened very quickly. It took less than half a minute before a hood was pulled over her, the noose was placed around her neck, and the trapdoor was opened." Her death was pronounced at 10:30 a.m. Her last word, breathed in a faint voice, was schnell, what means quickly. In our next documentary, we will explore all the background and details of her execution in Hamelin. It remains a fascinating story. Extensive British documents were only released around the year 2000, documents that have received little attention to date. They reveal that Irma Grese and other criminals were systematically administered lethal injections while hanging from the gallows, still in their death throes. All the information and many of the relevant documents will be available on this channel soon. If you enjoyed it, click on subscribe and the bell. It's free, and you'll be automatically notified when the new documentary airs.